So our next presenter is Aline Frey. Aline Frey has almost 20 years of research, teaching, and artistic experience across universities and colleges in New Zealand, Australia, and Brazil. Her PhD in Film and Cultural Studies in the University of Queensland, Australia, focuses on how Indigenous people are using multiple media formats to communicate about historical and contemporary struggles such as colonization and climate crisis. She holds a Master in the University of Otago, Master of Arts in the University of Otago in New Zealand, and currently works as an advisor in research development in Massey University. She has balanced excellence in teaching and research with a track record of artistic projects, working as an independent filmmaker and photographer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our dear Aline. Aline, welcome.
Kia ora, Marcos. Morena tato, ko Aline tōku ingoa, no parihi o kutipuna, ke te noho o ki tamaki makaro inaiane, na mihi nui ki a koto katoa. Olá a todos e todas, prazer falar com vocês hoje. Eu sou baiana, sou teropolitana, morando por agora 15 anos fora. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all here online. Thank you, Marcos, for the invitation. Such a wonderful work that is linked on connecting all these amazing works and people together. And it's, I'm gonna be, let's start sharing here. I'm gonna be talking okay. Are you seeing my presentation there? Yes? Just for me, yes, right? Awesome. So today I'm going to be talking about this idea of weaving space together, and that's something that we have been hearing about quite a lot since yesterday throughout the presentation. So I'm aware that this is not something new. I just want to also acknowledge that talking, as Moira was saying, from this Latin American perspective, like waving space together, that's something that our ancestors have been doing quite well for a long, long time. So the connections between Latin America and the Amerindians with Maori people and the Pacific, it's long knowing, and one of the examples that prove that is the kumara, that's so important for Maori people, and they are coming from the Quechua word of kuma, and shows that we have been crossing this long journey that Rodrigo mentioned yesterday. This very long journey of crossing the ocean has been happening for centuries. And so there is nothing new on talking about these relationships, these connections in between these very far away places, geographically displaced, but how much connection we can see, especially when we think about our colonial past. Anyone coming from Latin America that here discusses and debates on colonialism and the impacts and the brutality can easily recognize some of our historical backgrounds, of course, with the difference, but also with many similarities, especially when we think in terms of disruption, epistemological disruption that now has been kind of coming back. So it makes a lot of sense that many of us as researchers are relying again on kind of indigenous epistemologies, and we can only understand that thinking that that was kind of the natural way to go, but we had colonialism, we had the brutality of the power forces kind of posing, interrupting, disrupting, traumatizing all these knowledges that now we are coming back to here, as like Priscilla was talking yesterday about in terms of the architecture, for example. So I'm going to be talking about photography. And because of that, I had this question that I was trying to answer. So as a migrant, looking at the migrant photography, I was thinking how photography can create narratives of proximity, building traces of familiarity and binding different spaces together. So how can we use photography to make these spaces and people as well closer? And that's coming from a very kind of subjective question rather than kind of thinking in mainstream ways, not talking here about media representations of migrants and those things, but thinking a lot to the standpoint as a migrant and thinking in terms of self-representation. So because of that, and I think looking at the Waikato work as well, we are here into, even though it's kind of academic research, we have to consider the role of art. And when we are talking about art, metaphor is kind of keyword, right? And this song from Gilberto Gil that talks about metaphor, to talk about metaphor. So normally translations kills the metaphors, right? But in this rare case, and that's why I thought was worth, this song works quite well in English because the translation has like a twist with the words that keeps the meaning of the twist. So for an exercise, if you imagine tuna can on your hand, okay, just to keep with the idea of Gil here. So if you think about a tuna can that's so common here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that you are holding this tuna can on your hand, and then you can think along with the song that says, a can exists to contain something, but when the poet says can, they may mean the uncontainable. Therefore, do not insist on demanding from the poet to define the content within their can. In the poet's can, everything and nothing fit, because it is the poet's task to make the uncontainable fit into the can. So there is a twist with can and can in English that it's quite interesting. So just to say that when we are talking about photography and when we are looking at these works of self-representation in photography as a type, as a work of embodiment to weave this space together, I was surprised to see so many different strategies that artists are using to weave this space together. So there is, as Moura was saying, there is no kind of right or wrong you have here in artistic work. So, and that's because when you look at photography, you can only imagine that there are so many multiple meanings that one can read from the photograph. And that's because you are always going to have, right, the meaning of that the photographer wants, and then the meaning of the audience that was reading that. So the background, the context, who is reading the photo, who made the photo, where is the photo being displaced. So all these discussions would kind of make the idea of a meaning the photography quite difficult to you to establish. So Stuart Hall talk about that also, the impossibility of fixing a meaning into an image. So as much as we kind of work on to trying to make sure that photo is going to be having some kind of contextualization, and as much information as you give, maybe closer you can get to the meaning of the initial idea of the photo. But of course, through time, like Bart says, like if you look that long ago, maybe the time we raise some kind of information that you thought was clear on that photo. And Susan Sontag plays with that here when she says like it's impossible for the photographer to kind of make sure that the meaning will be established and will stay forever on that photo. So just this idea that photos are going to have these challenges of having multiple meanings is quite important when you are looking at the work of the photographers. Nonetheless, it's a kind of we can think in terms of adding on rather than something that will put that down. So as many we would say, like, if you can read many layers in a photography, the photography would be even richer, right? But with all that in mind, I was looking at the work of some migrants. So, and that first one, these South Sudanese Aton Aten. So she's a South Sudanese artist and writer, and she lives in Melbourne, Australia, and she combines this kind of photography with hand painting and body painting, incorporating these very strong colors from South Sudanese background that she has with also her dresses and things like that. So it is an extreme example, I think, of waving space together in your own body to taking self-portraits. And she has this series of self-portraits. And then you have I'm having to move because I'm missing myself here. Legrand, that is has also these. She has so many works that are around Australia in different museums and galleries and things. You can search for it. And what of her series is From There to Here, that talks about this kind of migrant journey and settlement in Australia. From this kind of Korean background perspective, and she's an academic also that researched on that. Ekaterina has this amazing work of Russians that moved from St. Petersburg to Australia and brought some objects, some very important objects. And then you have all these kinds of tales, for example, that you think to wave space together, maybe some objects that have the materiality, not only the photo, right? You have the materiality, and then you have the photos of these people holding these objects as a way to say, like, I still have a piece of this faraway place that I brought with me, and I can tell stories about these objects. And for example, one of the woman has a sculpture that was a sculpture that her husband brought to World War II. So he was kind of putting that inside his clothes during the war as a sculpture that reminds him his wife and his daughter. And then now she has this sculpture. And when she moved to Australia, she brought this sculpture with them. So this Liu Xiaxin has this, the way we eat. So he looks at food, and as migrants, we appreciate so much when we can meet our own food and recipes, right? And what he does is that he takes the photos of the people preparing the food, but also he takes photos of the ingredients, and then he puts the recipe. And he made like this beautiful exhibition that you can see the whole preparation of the food, but also the recipe and all the steps to make the food. And then that's about the series that he called The Way We Eat at Home. And I think so many things that we take for granted, and then when you migrate, that becomes kind of a rare, a small piece again of home, like not so much thinking in terms of the food only itself, but when you think in terms of the smell, the preparation, the time that takes to make that food, and the joy of having the food together, and teaching about that food for children and for other parts of the family, sharing food with community. So food is quite a strong one. This is in New Zealand. So Abdishiman, she does this work on thinking about the color of the skin. So how is representation of migrants in terms of these migrants that have a dark skin, or she used the term colorism to talk about the about her aim of putting that in evidence. So how do you make sure that we can discuss about that, because there is this kind of invisibility of colorism if you don't have these expressions. So she has this series of photos of people of color that she wants, and that's a kind of expression that I always find a bit awkward, but in English it makes a lot of sense. They say people of color, because yeah, we all have colors, right? But that's her discussion on her work of self-portraits, and trying to bring the beauty, and also to make sure that these bodies are not invisibilized by whiteness. And another work that I thought was quite interesting to talk, he is this Iranian son that he was looking at refugees specifically, and trying to fight back the stereotypes of refugees as people that just come and kind of come as victims and stay kind of relying on help to kind of have their lives assisted, and he tries to get out of this assistencialism idea, bringing some powerful images of refugees and talking about their stories and how they actually come here with a lot to contribute, and how can they should be seen as add-ons to society, rather than the ones that only need help. So migration, it's a huge theme. It's something that's academics are saying that are only gonna grow and grow. It's a growing field, and I have been thinking about self-representation of migrants as an academic, but also as a photographer. So I did this photographic exhibition that was called Belonging. That's also a word that came quite a lot in these presentations yesterday and today. And I think Belonging was a work that I did, and I didn't have the notion of how much I would learn throughout the process. But I was taking photos of migrant and refugee women that came to New Zealand, and I wanted to understand by the time what was the main reason for them to come here, and if they were coming because they were followers of like their fathers and husbands, or how much agency they had when they decided to move to New Zealand. And so that was kind of my naive first question. And then when I started learning the stories and getting to know the people, the thing got even more complex, and there were so many other layers of things. So this photo, for example, is from Olivia and Cordelia, her daughter. So Olivia came as a refugee to New Zealand when she was 6 months old. She's blind, and she was one of the biggest teachers in this process. I learned so much with her. She's a mother of 4, and she has a degree in law. That's quite difficult here in New Zealand. Very few universities that you can have the opportunity to even study law. And she's this people that are very resilient and has all these stories, amazing tales of how much she fought for the things that she believed in life and things like that. So I made the exhibition in Manawatu, Palmerston North. That's kind of countryside here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But I was beautiful event with the community of migrants, and that started to raise questions about my own process. As I was asking, I'm weaving space, but I'm actually also weaving people together. And I also feel myself like as this migrant that needs to tell also my own story. So it's kind of Belonging was the first step from where I wanted to go in terms of thinking that I had stories that I could tell by the text that I was writing beside the photos along with these women, but also I had stories that I'm still learning how to put into words, and maybe photography it's gonna be the way to tell these stories. So I was very moved by Pierre Bourdieu theory on habits when I was learning that that habits is, you have to think in terms of something spontaneous, right? Such as, let's think, playing an instrument or a fish that is swimming on the water. So habit is something that you don't have to think to know how to behave and how to be in a social context. So we learn habits through family, school, church, and the rules of the state, the law. So this is kind of the key structures that creates our habits. And Bourdieu was talking about his own story of social mobility and how he changed from one class to other through education, from a rural background to be this brilliant academic life, and so recognize and this changing life, he said in like his very last years of life, creates this idea of a habitus cleave. So it would be like a split inside yourself, something that breaks this spontaneity, because you kind of realizing and understand that there is other ways, there is this otherness, you start to be in a condition where you hold this conflicting and divide the cultural disposition, like you see things that people that are immersed on that context cannot see. And as a migrant, that's kind of daily life. You're like, every day you see things that you just weren't used to, that, or that people are kind of not even seeing or thinking about that way of dealing with the situation. And there are so many countless examples, because when you think about habits, I'm not saying here that you never change, but when you change a habit, is a very small tiny change in your life, like you adapt to small things. But habitus cleave is this kind of subjective divided. It's much bigger than something that it's not something that you can easily adjust. It's something that you kind of, like when you start, for example, ask where is home, where is, to use the Maori beautiful concept of turanga, why. So where is my standing place in terms of not only physically speaking, but spiritually and emotionally, where is my standing place? So with that, I started this project that's called Trace of Brazil. And Trace of Brazil was invited to be on this exhibition at the Auckland War Memorial Museum this year. Was there from March to October. It was a beautiful collective exhibition of Brazilian artists here. And I brought these two photos that I call the Passion for Brazil, with like this thing of passion fruit. That's the word for maracujá. And it's easy to maybe see, for example, the colors of Brazil on these photos, but it has a lot to do with kind of my internal connection with the fruit and with my memories, for example, of childhood, where like open the fridge of my house and always having there some passion fruit juice, and the smell of the fruit inside the house, and this tropical memory of like drinking juices, cold juice during the summer, this this year around summer that is Salvador. where I grew up. So when I took these photos, I'm kind of aware that nothing of this information that I'm giving to you is there. So there is not the smell of the fruit. There is not the story of my memories of this childhood drinking passion fruit juice. But there is this idea of a trace of Brazil that's actually a trace of my memories of my life in Brazil would be. But traces is also a key kind of word and concept in photography, right? Because that idea that it's a sense of a proximity that you can put in the objects when you are talking about that. So I think, yeah, it's my time is out. Okay, I'm gonna just close here with this. I love this idea of the photograph is literally an emanation of the reference from a real body, which was there, processing radiations which ultimately touch me. So this, for example, it's a photo of a bonfire, and bonfire is something that was 24th of June, and someone, and I was facing this bonfire here in New Zealand and thinking about a very traditional, amazing place that we celebrate someone party in Brazil, right? So that was what I could catch, a trace of someone in this photo. That's it, Marcos. Or you are there, but do you wanna?
Thank you, Aline. Yeah, now I have a question here for you, and just thought that we have the time for you to discuss. What is that?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that. So I just
No, you go. We have 5 minutes. We have one question. So if you can talk a little bit in 2 minutes, and we have a question before you complete.
Yeah, no, just as part of this process, I'm thinking about this idea of homemaking. So weaving space together as a way of homemaking, building this kind of in-between space. So I have been searching places around my daily life. So that's me going to work. That's me going to Mass University in North Shore. And in the way, every time that I pass through this specific space, I remember a specific space there in Salvador. And I feel hugged by this concrete. So it's a very kind of non-stereotype image of New Zealand. It's a non-natural space. New Zealand is very regarded for the beautiful landscape, but in this very urban and concrete space, that's where I feel kind of that I'm homemaking. I'm kind of embracing my connections with my hometown. So that's the way that I would close that. And of course, that's an effort of metaphors there. Yeah. So that's it. Kia ora.
Aline, thank you so much. I really enjoy your presentation. There is one question here, and I will make in the Portuguese. Is from Mika Verissimo. Really interesting question. Aline, você acha que a fotografia é a forma de arte que tem a capacidade de romper barreiras que existem, por exemplo, na linguagem escrita? Uma fotografia não é feita em inglês, português ou espanhol, ao contrário de texto escrito. I'm just reminded that there's one text, I think, I can't remember her name. She was Krauss. You remember this text, Aline Krauss? Yeah, she's also a curator. I forgot her name, but she talks about the photograph as a form of text as well. So, sorry, the question is yours, Aline. I was just found it really interesting, the theoretical reference that you brought in. Rosalind Krauss, that's very good, yes. Rosalind Krauss, she has a text that talks about photography as text. But back to you, Aline, the question.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting on the point question in terms of, because migrant photography has been one of the things that has been kind of calling attention for migrant photography is the possibility of making dialogues in different language. So that's quite, I think, a nailed one. As much as we can go on and on for the as I said, about meaning photography, because meaning and text are kind of different, right? So we can go on and on in thinking about the different meanings, but in terms of text, absolutely. So the image, it's something that we cannot be naive here and say like, oh, image communicates, doesn't matter the audience. There are so many studies showing that an image can be a representation of completely different things. Like the time that I lived, for example, in Switzerland, I could not understand the icons that they use for things there, and that was a big problem. So it's not to say that an image has a meaning that it's kind of sure there that you're not going to fight for that. But in terms of migrant photography, in this field, photography has been a welcome media to build communities together, to make dialogues, and to create this sense of belonging for people that maybe cannot connect verbally or textually in terms of the written and the verbal language, but through image, there is communication. Yeah, there is this possibility for sure.